This House is in session. Minutes of 23rd of February 2022, Monday the 14th of March 2022, Friday 25th of March 2022, Tuesday the 29th of March 2022 to be confirmed.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be confirmed.
Questions that the aforementioned minutes be confirmed. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby confirmed.
Messages from Her Excellency the President, petitions, papers, government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first reading of bills, statements by ministers, congratulatory and or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence or replies to questions, notice of motion for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance. Orders of the day.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of today's sitting.
The question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. Government business is the order of the day.
I'm the Honourable Minister of Housing and Lands to move the passing of a resolution to approve, in accordance with Section 5 of the Crown Lands Vesting and Disposal Act, Chapter 225, the vesting in a commercial special service vehicle in which the Government of Barbados will hold 25% of the shares, and the University of the West Indies at Cave Hill will hold the remaining 75% of the parcel of land, the property of the state, formerly known as the St. Joseph Hospital, situate at Ashton Hall in the parish of St. Peter in this island, for the purpose of a joint venture between the government and the University of the West Indies.
Honourable member for St. George South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and members of the Lord Chamber, those who are listening. Mr. Speaker, I rise in this House to introduce this resolution to Parliament. Mr. Speaker, this resolution is in accordance with Section 5 of the Crown Land Vesting and Disposal Act, approving, firstly, this is a cognate debate, Mr. Speaker, where we will ask Parliament to rescind its permission granted back in the year 2012 to lease the former St. Joseph Hospital to a company called American World Clinics Barbados Limited. We will speak to this, firstly, Mr. Speaker, and secondly, the second one is to vest the St. Joseph Hospital, the lands at the hospital. Yes, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the second part of the resolution is to vest the lands at the St. Joseph Hospital, some 21.485 acres, as articulated in the resolution, is 8.698 hectares in a joint venture, a commercial special purpose vehicle, or joint venture between the Government of Barbados and the University of the West Indies at Cave Hill. And Mr. Speaker, I know members of the public are probably asking, what is this special purpose vehicle? And it is not a Skoda, is not a Mercedes, it is a company. When you hear a special purpose vehicle, it's a company specifically created to manage the risks of both of the entities. So when we create this entity as a special purpose vehicle, we tend to ring fence the other assets of the university and also government. So the special purpose vehicle will only treat to the financing of the St. Joseph Hospital, and I will speak to that later. But I want to begin this debate by focusing firstly on the St. Joseph Hospital and giving a little history of the St. Joseph Hospital and its lands. The lands of the St. Joseph Hospital was owned by the state, having been purchased back in 1988 from Mothers of Sorrows Convent of Milwaukee, Inc. And this occurred back in September 1988. And in 1989, Mr. Speaker, the St. Joseph Hospital Act, Cap 54B, established the St. Joseph Hospital Board to administer and manage the St. Joseph Hospital. We know, Mr. Speaker, it's nothing new, the challenges that were faced with that institution back in 1991 and subsequently its closure back in 1995. But the hospital, like I said, eventually closed in the year 1995 under a Barbados Labour Party administration. But why it was closed? We know, Mr. Speaker, that the St. Joseph Hospital came under scrutiny by the public. The people of this country simply asked the government of the day, which was a former administration, who we know mismanaged the affairs of this country in most areas. And I make no apology when I make that statement, in most areas. And the general public questioned how the St. Joseph Hospital was being run, how it was managed, what were the policy guidelines, and it came under scrutiny by the Public Accounts Committee. When we came to office in 1994, it was evident by the then Prime Minister that the St. Joseph Hospital, in its current operation then, was a drain on taxpayers in this country, and of course, on government funding. And it was closed down. So this site is situated at Ashton Hall, St. Peter, adjoins Our Lady of Sorrows Roman Catholic Church, and I said it contains 8.698 hectares of land, some 21.485 acres. The St. Joseph Hospital, prior to 1995, was at the time a political football, and I said a drain on government resources. And I repeat it, an inquiry of the public accounts was launched due to the nature of the operations at that time. But I go on to June 2011. We closed it in 2008. The then administration came to office again, and they sought to reopen it. And again, the same thing happened. In 2011, the cabinet then approved the text of a memorandum of understanding between the government of Barbados and a company called American World Clinics Barbados Limited. And I mentioned that in my preamble. Concerning the lease of the St. Joseph Hospital for the development and the operation of what they call then an international healthcare center to be run by American World Clinics Barbados Limited. And there were major terms set out in the lease agreement. And the lease was for a period of 25 years. Because remember, none of this got off the ground. For a period of 25 years, with an option to renew for a further 25 years. And during that term, the rent to the American World Clinic was supposed to be $1,000 per annum for the first 2 years, to increase to $100,000 per annum for the next 3 years, and thereafter, the rents would go at market rate. All the structures, the newly erected and renovated structures, would revert to the state after the lease agreement. But in April 2012, Mr. Speaker, parliamentary action was done on the resolution. The number here is resolution number 12, 2012, to lease the property. And those documents were prepared, but nothing never happened. And in 2013, Invest Barbados advised the government then that the American World Clinic expressed an interest in buying and purchasing the property. Again, nothing never got off the ground. So as a consequence of the request from American World Clinics to purchase rather than lease, we have to value property. The Barbados Revenue Authority then valued the property, the Revenue Commissioner, and that valuation in 2014, January 23rd to be exact, in the year 2014, that valuation stood at some $26 million. But American World Clinic offered pittance for what we had as a 21.485 acres. They didn't match BRA valuation, the Barbados Revenue Authority valuation. So the discussion then of a partnership arrangement with the sale, it failed to bear fruit. Several things happened. The government of the day then gave consideration to a long-term lease for a wellness center, a long-term lease for medical tourism facility, and again, a long-term lease with options to purchase. So this was a political football over the years by the former administration, and I give the sequence of events that occurred from back in 1988 when it was purchased to present. But none of these negotiations came to a concluded agreement. And while the government of the day continued to accumulate usuries to the University of the West Indies. And we know, Mr. Speaker and members of this lower chamber, thousands of Barbadians suffered under the last administration. Thousands of university graduates, and we often use the term member for St. Michael, Southeast, and member for Christchurch. We use the term. The last administration who sat here when we were over there kicked down the ladder that they climb upon to achieve some level of tertiary education in this country. We had in St. George South, I often hear the member for St. John. He speaks to me on how many persons from St. John were deprived of that opportunity to enter those lovely gates that most of us entered. The member for St. Philip South, he speaks to me in those terms as well. The member for St. Philip North, we know how the eastern zone is. We are very close. The member for St. Philip West, who is now taking on that mantle of leading the education development of our people in this country, she speaks to me about it as well. And all my colleagues, the member for the city, the member for St. Michael West, the member for St. Andrew, the member for St. George North, who deals with people daily in her day-to-day running of the affairs of the Barbados Workers Union. She had many calls and many sleepless nights addressing these challenges with our people. My good friend, the member for St. Michael's South as well, and St. James South. We all endured those dark days where our people were challenged by the policies, or the lack thereof, we can say, of good policies by the last administration. And this resolution, particularly this resolution, brought back the memories of many persons, and we need not forget as we seek to build out and develop Barbados on all frontiers. We dare not forget as a people how Barbadians were deprived of opportunity, educational opportunity at a tertiary level to better themselves. I was the first university graduate in my family of three boys. I had the opportunity to attend University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus, and also KFL campus. And I stand proud of the efforts by this administration. And we cannot say past administrations back then, because they forgot what was done in the 60s and in the 70s by both administrations, where our trust was to empower people to make Barbados the best place to live, work, do business, and raise a family. And to do that, education was at the forefront of our development. But the last administration forgot about that. They were busy meddling in the affairs of many things other than what we call developmental and people focus. I know my good friend from St. Michael's South, he has, his slogan is people before politics, people above politics. And he could say it before too, because politics is about people. So thank you, member for Christchurch East. It's a lovely slogan, because in all we do in these chambers and in all we do on a daily basis, the focus is on enfranchising and empowering people. And that's why the Barbados Workers Union and the NUPW and all the unions, we respect them and we have embraced them into the Labour Party's vision and its mandate to build out a better Barbados. In 2018, Mr. Speaker, when this administration came to office, when we assumed office, we recognized that the government had owed some over 220 million, I think, to be exact, to the University of the West Indies. And having done that restructuring, we treated the university the same way we treated every single lender, whereby they were all given a 37% haircut, every single one of them. But we recognize that if we were to carry out our mandate, our developmental mandate, as articulated in our manifesto, where we said that education was at the core of our development, and it was our commitment to and to reform Barbados' system of education and training, we recognize that we had to do something different with the University of the West Indies. And it could not be the same old funding every year to the tune of 100 million. The member for St. Michael's Southeast can recall, and also St. Philip West. They're understanding numbers probably better than I do, because they were there and they're there dealing with the day-to-day running of that very important ministry. But we recognize that 220 million that by the last administration, failure to pay tuition fees for working class people and all Barbadians. And then this financial year, 2022-2023, for example, we will provide some $99.2 million to the University of the West Indies. So the vesting of this land, this 21.485 acres, we said, you know, let's give the university the opportunity to create a balance sheet profile. So when we do that, several things happen. When you create a balance sheet profile, then university can begin to go out to the world to look for financing, finance their own development. All West Indian governments, I let more say all West Indian governments in the Caribbean. All West Indian government. Member for St. Philip, South Last. I let more say that, right? Always after, a little humor is always good at times, when you're engaging in serious debate, because you get too serious and you want to tell the public really in some terms that are not parliamentary what the last administration did to the University of the West Indies and to the students. But all West Indian governments, and I will speak to it later, have embarked on policies to ensure that education, not only tertiary education, but education at all levels, remains the core of the country's development. And presently at the University of the West Indies, all lands are vested in the government of Barbados, and no rental is being charged by the government. But that is testimony to how we treat the University of the West Indies, how we treat education. And government, the last government under this administration, made commitment to vest the lands at the Lazaretto in the UWA. These are all state lands. This was agreed by the last administration, BLP administration, but was never followed through by the last administration. So we are here now in another term of government, seeking to create a profile for the University of the West Indies as it relates to their balance sheet, where we will create this special purpose vehicle, where the government will own 25% shares of this company, and the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill, will own 75% shares of this company. And this company, as I mentioned earlier, seek to minimize financial risk to the other assets, but will ensure that university is given the opportunity to go to market. They can float bonds, build their balance sheet, so someone will be willing to finance them, give them a level of independence as well, and take that strain off of government resources annually. Because when they float a bond and they're able to, at the end of it, sell the bond to get some needed cash, capital, to invest, that speaks to development. But investing of the lands in the UWA is nothing new. And I said earlier, currently the lands at Cave Hill are leased to UWA for a term ending in the year 2066. And we're in the year 2022. And I spoke about West Indian government across the Caribbean, and I can speak to 3 countries. Trinidad has allocated lands to UWA for a hospital. Grenada has also donated significant land resources to UWA, and Antigua and Barbuda are in the process of doing the same, allocating significant lands to University of the West Indies. So this is a regional-wide approach to putting UWA on a self-sustaining financial model to secure the social and economic future of our regions for years to come. And I want to applaud Prime Minister for having the foresight to come up with this financial, if you want to call it a model, can't call it an instrument, but this financial model where we can seek to give university an independent profile rather than continuously relying on government's resources annually. We're not saying we will not give university, because the first thing we did when we came to office in 2018, government owed university $220 million. And we settled the debt, despite the 37% haircut across the board. But this land is not about settling debt with the University of the West Indies, because you can see the approach across the Caribbean. I'm sure that the Minister of Education, the Minister, former Minister and present Minister, along with my colleagues, they are anxious to speak on these resolutions. But I want to say that it gladdens my heart to see the government and the university combining to widen the frontiers of teaching and research in Barbados in such a manner. I am not here to tell the university what to do with this land. But I know there were talks before on medical research back in 2020, but we cannot tell the university what to do with the land. But I know this land will be used for developmental purpose. According to the University of the West Indies, they have several options. And I can read from an extract in 2020, hospital, new facilities in UWI vision. They didn't only speak about health care, but they spoke about climate change.
You're making a document, you also want to remember?
We can make this a document of the House, Mr. Speaker. Yes, it is the new university vision. It was a newspaper article of March 14, 2020. Came out of Barbados today. And I laugh. But we spoke to, the document
Is it
spoke.
authenticated? Is that authenticated, sir?
Yes, it is, Mr. Speaker.
Not coming from a newspaper. It's
Well,
an article. It's an article,
it's an article.
not authentic at all.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Therefore, if it's not authentic, then it cannot be made a document in the House.
But I will still reference it, Mr. Speaker. Once that is fine with you,
But
Mr.
just to
Speaker.
talk about it, you know, you can't make it a document in the House because
Thank you, Mr.
there's
Speaker.
no authenticity to it.
Noted, Mr. Speaker. But I will still reference it
Continue, I remember.
just to show, you know, the public and the lower house the work that the university is doing. And they spoke about not only financial health care, financing health care, but they spoke about after-school care for children, for the many employees and students, with a student body of 6,160 and a staff complement of 953. And it says Cave Hill was overdue for a day or evening care center, and that was quoted by Professor the Most Honourable Eugene Barato. The facility, she said, will service the campus and neighboring community for daycare and provide after-school care for children of evening students. This could also serve as a built-in lab for students studying early childhood education, she said. Now, this is developmental. Now, we are taking an asset that was left, that was mismanaged, and then left sitting idly by the last administration. And I don't think any person in the right senses would have objections to us vesting 21.485 acres of land, 8.698 hectares of land of the St. Joseph Hospital that was mismanaged by the last administration into the University of the West Indies. When the former principal, Professor the Most Honourable, spoke glowingly about development coming at the University of the West Indies. Member for St. Mike, for Christchurch West Central, she also spoke about climate change and addressing climate change in a meaningful way. Shouldn't we partner with an institution like that for the betterment of our country and our people? Mr. Speaker, the land to be vested, Mr. Speaker, was toured by both this government and University of the West Indies before any talks about a special purpose vehicle came about. And, you know, very often we speak about things, but this government, we do not make pronouncements that will not come to fruition like the last administration. In speaking to the former principal and the present principal, they're happy that we are vesting this land in the University of the West Indies. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, before I take my seat, this type of planned partnership that we have entered into with the University of the West Indies, KFL, is completely in sync with our proposals and our desire to see derelict and disused properties in Barbados refurbished to the mutual benefit of the owners, government, and the country at large. Mr. Speaker and members of this chamber and the public, it is counterproductive and disheartening to see so many assets going to waste in this country or sitting idly by. And I say so knowing full well that the government has been guilty, not this government, over the years of allowing many of its properties to remain idle for far too long. And we have started that journey of addressing derelict and vacant lots in this country. And we can speak to this St. Joseph Hospital as a derelict government property that we are putting to good use. And as you know, when we came to office, we recognized several government buildings that were in a state of, I would say, disrepair, that were not being used. And we have started a program to refurbish and rejuvenate a number of them, of state properties, beginning with those in and around Bridgetown. The member for the city would be very happy, such as the old Supreme Court and Town Hall that is being renovated right now. Then we went to Barbados Water Authority Gatehouse. Then we went to the Welfare Building on Country Road. And soon, the Old Town and Country Planning Building, Block C at Garrison, among others. We have come to this house, Mr. Speaker, and members of this chamber, many times before during the last 3+ years for permission to enter into long-term developmental leases of government properties with persons who have agreed to restore and maintain them at a rent affordable to them. Our policy, Mr. Speaker, is that in this country, of our tiny physical size, we cannot afford the luxury of lands remaining idle for long, lands and derelict properties. It is why we refer to joint hands. We prefer to join hands with interested partners and utilize our lands in ways, Mr. Speaker, that promote development across the landscape. And restoration of derelict residential properties is also a key aim of this administration. The Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, we have already drafted a cabinet paper. I have not yet taken it to cabinet. But the goal is to create a win-win partnership with citizens in this country in an environment where resources, including land and finances, are scarce. So when we see idle lands that can be leased by the state to assist young entrepreneurs, this is something that we want to get into. When we see idle lands and derelict properties where we have sites and services already installed, when we say sites and services, we're talking about roads and access to water and access to electricity. When we see those sites and services, not only for the young entrepreneurs, but we have told this country that over this term, 5 years, we'll build 10,000 plus houses. And if we have some 35,000 derelict and vacant lots in this country, this task of building 10,000 houses, and I agree with the Prime Minister, is a task that we can achieve. And I want you to know that as we go on this journey, what we call the silent revolution within the ministry, and we stumble upon government buildings, we have created an audit, let me say, of all government buildings and derelict properties across the country that we can put to good use. And we have been meeting with investors, persons who we believe can come up with the capital without creating a SPV. By the way, we only do that so that the university, who don't have any major assets, lands, they will become well endowed with lands, and their balance sheet will look good, and they can go to secure financing and have a level of independence. But when we come across these properties and derelict buildings, we engage investors in a way to help develop Barbados and to build something on them. If it's not a house for persons to own a home in this country, or if it's not a property where we can empower and enfranchise small businesses and entrepreneurship, then we engage in a rejuvenation project to reduce our rental bill as a government. Clean and green. Beautifying. Thank you, member for Christchurch West Central. We know the member for Christchurch West Central is on a mission. Just like we're on a silent revolution, his is not so silent, because he has been out there in the highways and the byways, beautifying Barbados, bringing back some respectability to the environment. That is what he's doing. Because when we came to office, I don't want to get into the environment, but when we came to office, if there's one thing that every single person in this country said was, Barbados looks atrocious. It's dirty. It needs cleaning. And I want to thank the member for St. Michael East, who sits directly opposite me now, eyeballing me. He did good work in that Ministry of Environment. And my good friend from Christchurch West Central has taken that baton, and he is running with it. So this is all part of the developmental trust in this country, to keep Barbados clean, not only clean, but to improve our infrastructure. But not just only improve our infrastructure, but to put it to good use so that our citizens will be proud and take care of buildings we put in their hands and properties we put in their hands to be of good use for our citizens. As I close, Mr. Speaker, I wish to state categorically that I, as Minister of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, I support the vesting of the St. George's Hospital in the proposed commercial special vehicle for the redevelopment of the site by the government of Barbados and the University of the West Indies at Cave Hill. And I know that the University of the West Indies, they have always been on a developmental trust and pushing new frontiers, as I read earlier in an article from the then Professor, the Most Honourable Eugene Bartow. And she has passed on the baton to Professor Landis as well, whom I have good communications with very often, whether it was in sports, whether it is in education, whether it is in infrastructure. And he understands, and he has supported this vesting of 21.485 acres of land in the University of the West Indies. And we'll be back here soon, as instructed by our leader, the Prime Minister of this country, to vest the lands of the Lazaretta in the University of the West Indies as well, so they can create a lovely balance sheet and they can go to the market to secure financing and stop the drain on the public resources. Not that we have a difficulty giving University of the West Indies funding, because we cleared the funding of $220 million when we came to office in 2018. But there's nothing better than self-help if you can help yourself. And that 25% share ownership by the government is to ensure that the policies as articulated by us in the Educational Trust are at the forefront, and that we have an interest, an ownership interest in this SPV that will be created by the University of the West Indies. And Mr. Speaker, I look forward to the day when the wider university bounces back to financial health and vitality and cements its place among the top echelons of the wider centers of educational excellence in the world. We were once there, and we will get back there. Despite the 10 years of a lost decade, we call it, or the challenges by the last administration that took them from the pinnacle and placed them not at the bottom, but declining status in the world as one of the top universities, or what I call educational excellent institutions worldwide, known worldwide. So, Mr. Speaker, as I close, I again speak to the rescission of the permission granted in 2012 to lease the former St. Joseph Hospital to the American World Clinics Barbados, which did not get off the ground. That is here with you to rescind that decision. And secondly, to vest the St. Joseph Hospital in a commercial special purpose vehicle or joint venture between the government of Barbados and the University of the West Indies at Cable Campus of land 21.485 acres, with government of Barbados having 25% share ownership and the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill, 75% share ownership. And with those words, Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged.
You have to move the resolution, sir. You have to move.
Resolution do pass. Thank you.
Honourable Member for St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support the resolution before this Honourable Chamber to vest the property at the St. Joseph Hospital in the commercial special purpose vehicle as very clearly enunciated just now by the Honourable Member for St. George South. And I rise, Mr. Speaker, for two reasons. One has to do with my connection with education, and that is more a familial connection with education, but also as the Member of Parliament for the constituency of St. Peter. You see, Mr. Speaker, the St. Joseph Hospital evokes emotional response to quite a number of persons of the North, including persons from the constituency that I have the honor to represent. As recently as about a month ago, I was with the Honourable Member for Christchurch West and the Honourable Member for St. Michael's South. And we were celebrating the recommissioning of the jetty at Spitestown. The jetty that is now in full operation for the use of the people of Spitestown, as well as for those who will want to visit Spitestown. And I'm very clear about the order in which I speak. The jetty is for the benefit of the people of Spitestown, as well as for the benefit of those who will visit Spitestown. One of the persons who worked hard on the refurbishment of that jetty, in the conversations afterward, recounted the fond memories of growing up and hearing that they were born. That gentleman's mother gave birth to him at the St. Joseph Hospital. And that is a story Mr. Speaker, that you hear across the constituency, and not just, as you may be tempted to think, from persons of means, but from persons across the constituency, from persons across the north. And so any mention of the St. Joseph Hospital evokes that kind of a response, an emotional response. And so any action to see positive development at that location is action that is welcomed by the people of the North, and particularly by the people I have the absolute honor to represent in this honorable chamber. Education and supporting education is something that we in St. Peter hold very dearly to. Because most of us, almost all of us, are where we are because of education. And we are very proud of the institutions we have within the parish. We have the Elliott Belgrave Primary, which is in the process of being refurbished. We have the Corrosion Parish School, which is also being refurbished. We have the Alexandra School. We have the Roland Edwards Primary. We have All Saints Primary. And we have St. Luke's Academy. And so, Mr. Speaker, we have around us a plethora of educational institutions. We have their nurseries. The people of St. Peter value education. We also value relationships with educational institutions. And at this point, it is not yet in operation, but I want to thank the Honourable Member for St. Michael's Southeast, as well as the Prime Minister and government generally, for the work in bringing back that important institution in Spike Sound, the Alma Paris School. That we expect, as education is reformed in this country, will cater to persons who too often are left on the periphery of national development. This government recognizes that everybody, all young people, all people generally, but all of our young people, have a role to play in national development. All of our young people have the potential to contribute. All of our young people have to be given the tools appropriate to their individuality that will allow them to make meaningful contributions to this society, but also that will allow them to feel that they are meaningful contributors. Because there is nothing, Mr. Speaker, that makes a person disconnected as much as feeling that you are not wanted, you are not a part of, you are not integral to what is taking place around you. And those persons get disconnected, and then we want to build institutions to restrict what we refer to as antisocial activity, which in some cases, maybe in many cases, is activity that is engendered by our lack of respect of their individuality and their need to be approached and equipped in a manner that is suitable to them and not in a manner that has been prescribed by the person who made the cookie cutter. And so, Mr. Speaker, education is important, health care is important. As the Honourable Member for St. George South indicated, we are not at this point fully aware of the direction in which this special purpose vehicle will take the use of the property. But I want to say, at this point, beyond where we go in terms of use of the property, the fact that we are partnering with our university in the West Indies, and the Cave Hill campus in particular, is of tremendous significance to me. Our educational institutions need our support. And as a government, and as a party in government, we've always been of the view that we come together as a country to facilitate the education of our young people. In other words, we do not leave it up to parents to decide, well, I can only afford Fifth Standard, I could only afford CAPE, I could only afford university, undergraduate. Our approach to equipping our young people is that as a society, we come together, we pool our resources, and we allow our young people to benefit from the pooling of the resources. Education is not free, we understand that. And those who would want to maybe poo-poo our approach ought to understand that this party in government does not come to policy making in an immature way. We know that education costs, but our position is that we pool our resources. We treat to education as our foreparents treated when they put together the susus and the meeting terms. We pool our resources and we send our children to school. We as a country, we as a society, pay for the education of our young people. And when government then takes a decision that it will partner with our university, and I think we ought to understand this particular vesting. This vesting is not one of simply handing over the property to the University of the West Indies. The structure of this vehicle gives the distinct impression of partnership. It understands that the University of the West Indies will drive the partnership. They are the educational institution. They are the ones providing the education for our young people. They are the ones who are visioning on how to earn revenue, how to strengthen balance sheets, as the balance sheet, as the Honourable Member for St. George South indicated, how to leverage assets so that the institution can be more effective in delivering on its mandate. Its mandate being to educate the young people of our region and to educate the young people of this country. So that this vehicle speaks to, exudes partnership, 75% with the University of the West Indies, 25% with government. So that through this resolution, through this commercial special purpose vehicle, we say not just to the university, we say not just to ourselves as a government, but we say to the public that the delivery of education in this country is a matter of team effort. It is a matter of all of us coming together, pooling our resources, and delivering on raising the level of competency and the ability, the skills level of all of our people. And Mr. Speaker, as the minister responsible for workers and workers' welfare in this country, I am happy for any and every legitimate opportunity to better equip the people of this country. Our people, we have said over many, many decades, are our resource. But we don't often act as though we are serious about the fact that our people have been and will continue to be our greatest resource. Just as the university will leverage its participation in this commercial special purpose vehicle, our country has been leveraging the ability, the skills, the aptitude, and the attitudes of our people for decades. That is how we are able to stand head and shoulders above countries, states that are much larger than ourselves, because we have understood what it is to leverage the ability, the education, the capacity of our people. This resolution speaks to the university leveraging, but it also speaks to the country continuing that process of equipping our people and then leveraging that improved human being so that as a country we are able to rise even higher as we pursue our developmental path. The reinvigoration, the refurbishment, whatever reinvestment takes place at the St. Joseph Hospital site, Mr. Speaker, will also be important to the people of St. Peter and the people of the North because it will bring additional activity to the area. Additional activity, additional persons moving around mean additional economic opportunities for persons who will be earning their living by economic activity in the North, in St. Peter, and in the nearby town, Speightstown. And I have to say, Mr. Speaker, that for whatever takes place at the St. Joseph Hospital site, Speightstown, we expect, will be that commercial hub which will act as the service point for that development. And so it will assist as we continue to bring more and more life and economic activity into Speightstown. Any kind of development that takes place around the town, in the environs of the town, will be of benefit to the town. And now we see the person who in Speightstown, who we refer to as the mayor of the town, asked me twice in the last 2 weeks, which is really the capital of Barbados, because he says at night he drives through Bridgetown, sees a couple of cats, a dog, and maybe a few people walking toward the bus stand. But by the time he gets to Speightstown, there's all kinds of life, all kinds of activity, all kinds of music, all kinds of entertainment going on in Speightstown. That is not exactly an advertisement, but I'm just letting you know, Mr. Speaker, because I know you spend a lot of your time in the southern parts and you may not be fully familiar with the fact that Speightstown is really where it is happening. And to invite you to spend some time in Speightstown. But we've been in preparation for the development that we expect to take place around Speightstown in the north generally, have been working assiduously to make sure that Speightstown is a location that will provide not just commercial services, but entertainment services, that will provide the heritage assets, that will allow any activity in the north of the country to have a meaningful anchor in that location. And so I mentioned earlier that we have just reopened, recommissioned the Speightstown jetty. We are also close to completing the drainage in the Speightstown area. We would remember that whenever rain fell too long or too hard, those of us in St. Peter would start to get a little bit nervous because it was almost considered inevitable that Speightstown would flood. And I'm happy that through the efforts of BTII and the Honourable Member for St. Michael's South Central, who led in that effort, that we are close to completing the drainage in the Speightstown area. Some work now is being done in the feeder, so just south of the Wim Gully, the water course that connects the Wim Gully to the salt pond is now being packed with boulders because we are continuing to prepare Spikestone for whatever development takes place at the St. Joseph Hospital site and whatever development takes place in the north generally. We've also, in addition to the physical infrastructure, we've done some tidying up at the bus terminal in terms of how the public service vehicles operate. They're now operating from the Spikestown bus terminal that was designed to accommodate them from the beginning, and they're now operating from there. The Honourable Member for St. Philip's South has indicated to me that some work will be done to address the condition of the market at the traffic lights. So that is work that is to be done as well. Outside of hard infrastructure, we have started the process, Mr. Speaker, of twinning Spikestown with Cape Coast in Ghana and with Bristol in the United Kingdom. We already have a twinning arrangement with Charleston in South Carolina. Charleston is the city where the Carolinas generally, but Charleston and the Carolinas were colonized, not by us, but by those who were in charge at the time, but out of Spikestown. And so we already have a twinning agreement with them, and we are working toward establishing a sister city relationship. But we've reached out to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has already reached out to its counterparts in Ghana and in the United Kingdom, and we have been sharing the information, and we expect those twinning arrangements to become a reality very soon. Those twinning relationships, Mr. Speaker, help us to recognize our historical development, helps us to understand where we have come from, those things that have impacted the development, so that when we visit Spikestown, we need to have an idea of how did it come to be. And I must also indicate to this Honourable Chamber that we've just a week and a half ago or so launched the Spikestown Global Freedom Festival in honor of the hero Cuffy, who struck that first blow that resulted in us being able, as the descendants of Africans traded across the Atlantic, to be standing and sitting in this honorable chamber. That first blow was struck by Cuffy, and we have started a Freedom Festival, Spikestown Global Freedom Festival, because we believe that just as Spikestown exported colonialism, just as Spikestown exported racism to southern United States, we have a responsibility to export now freedom and thoughts of freedom and self-determination to the world. And that we intend, Mr. Speaker, to do. You may be aware, since it is part of the Season of Emancipation calendar, that on the 12th of June, that day when Cuffy was to be installed in a grand Akan ceremony in Spikestown as King of Barbados, we will be celebrating that day. We're beginning this year. It is in the National Season of Emancipation calendar. It shall continue until, and we will be celebrating his contribution to democracy, his contribution to self-determination, his contribution, that contribution that allows people of African descent to realize that we can be masters of our fate. We can determine our destiny. And so, Mr. Speaker, I didn't really stand to speak a lot about Spikestown, except that Spikestown will be that hub to service whatever development takes place at the St. Joseph Hospital site. We are committed to the partnership with our educational institutions, and we will continue to support that partnership. Before I take my seat, Mr. Speaker, I just want to say one thing. The history of this country is a tortured history. And I spoke to the fact that our forefathers, our foreparents, did a lot of hard work, unpaid, against their will. There is a mill wall on the St. Joseph Hospital property. And I am saying this publicly because some of these things need to be said publicly. We in St. Peter expect that that mill wall will remain in its location and will be preserved. As a monument, it is one of the 22 mill walls in St. Peter that are standing. I believe we may be the parish with the most mill walls that are standing. And we expect that when the story of sugar and rum is written, when the application is made to UNESCO for World Heritage Site status, that St. Peter will feature prominently, and that the St. Joseph Hospital site will be one of those monuments to the hard work, the forced labor of our foreparents. And we expect that that mill wall will be preserved. A number of the mill walls in St. Peter, I would say out of the 22, maybe only about 3 or 4 of them could be considered derelict, even though they're all still standing. But I believe we have to build a consciousness around those mill walls. They were erected to enlarging the coffers of the white planter class. They also served, and this happened in the St. Peter context, to enlarging the coffers of the white merchant class. But I believe even as we reclaim our Atlantic destiny, that we have to repurpose these instruments of torture, really, or instruments of tortured existence, to remind us and to remind those who come after us that our foreparents are really the ones who built this country, that our foreparents are really the ones who built Europe and the colonial powers of Europe through the labor that they put in at the sites of these mill walls. And so we expect that the mill wall at the St. Joseph Hospital site will be preserved and will be used as a monument to the contribution of the African and African-descended people of this country. Mr. Speaker, St. Peter and the people who I am here to represent support the partnership with the University of the West Indies. We look forward to what will be done at that site. We expect that it will enhance education, either directly on the site or by its contribution to the overall performance and delivery of education of the University of the West Indies generally. We support the partnership, and so, Mr. Speaker, I have no hesitation in supporting the resolution before this honourable chamber. I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member for St. James Central.
I'm obliged, Mr. Speaker. I want to begin by congratulating the Honourable Member for St. George South, who piloted this particular resolution and did so quite eruditely. I think, Mr. Speaker, sir, this debate provides us with an opportunity to reflect on a few fundamentals which are at their core developmental. And if we take our positions in this chamber seriously, we have to reflect, sir, not only on the misfortunes that befell this country as a result of the past activities of those who have held office, but we must also lift the gaze of the nation into the future and to create a perspective for our people as to some of the benefits that can be derived from an undertaking such as that which is now contemplated by this particular piece of resolution, this particular resolution. I want to say, sir, that obviously it was necessary and it is necessary for us never to lose sight of the fact that the Sisters of the Sorrowful Mother had a functioning hospital in Barbados that did wonderful good work, primarily for the people of the North, but quite frankly, sir, for people all across this country. I did not grow up in the parish of St. Peter, nor indeed in the parish of St. James, sir, but I do recall well a night on the 1st of November. I will not date the age of my younger brother, but when he was rushed to the St. Joseph Hospital because he had had a severe accident at home and the QEH was unable to treat to him immediately. It is felt by the doctors who looked after him that that intervention medically may have saved his life. I think, sir, that obviously this country, after the hospital closed, felt a certain sense of loss. And it is important for us, sir, to recognize that even as we continue to evolve the improvement of medical care in Barbados, the question of the geographical access to quality care, equality of access across this nation, irrespective of where you come from, ease and equality of access will continue and must, in my view, continue to be on the front burner of national discussion and development. And obviously, Mr. Speaker, sir, especially for an administration like this, which has set its face like flint against the tyranny and cruelty and abuse of the public purse by way of corrupt practice and maladministration, then, Mr. Speaker, sir, again, the fact and the story of the St. Joseph Hospital is going to constantly be in our minds. This resolution, sir, is not about that tortured experience. As I stand here, I reflect on that Public Accounts Committee meeting, or those Public Accounts Committee meetings, that hearing. I reflect, Mr. Speaker, sir, on the agony of the people at the time. I reflect, sir, on the shock that persons held in high esteem were, shall we say, for want of a better way of putting it, exposed to be participating in ways and in manners, sir, that drag them, their reputation, and their public image into the mud. It is, again, correct to say, and I must say that the honourable member who piloted this bill did justice in making the point that a country cannot lose sight of that aspect of its past. There are some who to this day, even though that conduct was replicated by a subsequent administration under the same party banner, even though that conduct was replicated, sir, there are some to this day who sat in their midst who will not raise a voice of apology and will say to this country that apology means nothing. So that we are dealing and treating to an issue which is on one hand developmental, but on the other hand it is also an issue about which this country still has open wounds. And it is connected to a form of activity about which this country still has open wounds. Perhaps, though, it is more useful to reflect on the way forward. And as I think about the way forward, sir, I am pleased that at the core of this particular resolution is an opportunity for Barbados to be at the centerpiece of a developmental effort with an institution which is absolutely critical to this nation's growth. The University of the West Indies will now have at its disposal, by way of the vesting of land, an asset that can be monetized. The University of the West Indies, sir, is in a position where it can enhance its independence to a certain extent in order to leverage that asset in order to make sure that that land can be used as collateral, sir, and part of a journey which allows them to finance their way, their independent growth, their independent development, without constant reference to the public purse. And again, that is also part of this country's tortured past. Because, sir, your constituents, much like mine, are anxious to know that there will be somewhere, some place found in the annual budget of the government, in the annual estimates of revenue and expenditure, more money for better roads, more money, Mr. Speaker, sir, for care of the elderly, more money, Mr. Speaker, sir, for us to look after our little children better. The fact of the matter is, sir, that the University of the West Indies, and properly so, makes a call on the public purse for well in excess of $100 million every year in order to operate its finances. And properly so. And this administration, again, properly so, stood in the breach when others were prepared to turn away from the university. And we understood, sir, that that could not happen, and it is to the undying credit of she who leads this government that she stood in the breach and said that it cannot be that a mother or a father must choose between 2 or 3 children which one of you gets the benefit of higher education and which one of you does not. And that, sir, is part of the journey that we have had to take in order to right-size the ship and correct some of the things that went horribly wrong in the past. But as we look to the future, sir, we are also looking at a world-class university. A world-class university, sir, that brings to this country an element of cultural diversity. That is important. It is a university, sir, that goes beyond just the cultural diversity, sir, but it forces us to come on a daily basis, face to face with a reality. And let me speak openly here now that I too have a constituency interest. Because while this particular resolution speaks to St. Peter, sir, the lands at the Lazaretto fall well within the constituency of St. James Central. And I am indebted, and I will say so here on the floor of this House, to Professor Sir Hilary Beckles. Because, sir, when the Usain Bolt complex was being created, the issue in the Lazaretto, the issue, sir, in Prospect, was that the people, the working class, humble folk down there, grew up generation after generation after blessed generation, looking across at an idle piece of land on which there were 3 antennas that were reserved for the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation. And it was as though there was nothing on this earth that was more important than the antennas, and that the recreational opportunity for a community of people, sir, who, and I have no doubt those who planned the development of the west coast of Barbados may have at some stage meant well, but they were woefully short-sighted. And so therefore, sir, there was no provision made. You got houses, but no provision made for recreation. There are houses, but what of the young people who should be playing a sport coming out of the community, sir? And that is true not only for Prospect. If you begin a journey on foot, as I have had to do by way of canvassing, and you start in Prospect, sir, you walk all the way down to Old Town, Mr. Speaker, sir, you will not pass more than one playing field, and that playing field located down in Old Town. Good Shepherd School has a little field, sir, but you've got to go to your way to get there if you're walking along the main road. And those 2 little dots service, those 2 little areas, sir, have historically been expected to serve the interests of over 10,000 people. This is a form of madness. And then we ask ourselves why it is that in that same catchment area, some of our youngest people in Barbados have fallen like cracks, sir, fallen through the cracks, sir, in the floorboards. Some of our youngest people, sir, have been wrapped up in narcotics, not wrapped up in areas of crime and criminal activity, sir. What is the outlet? What is the benefit that goes towards lifting these young people up socially? But the planners did not have that in mind. So along comes the University of the West Indies, and I say, sir, I am indebted to Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, who in one conversation, I went as a member of Parliament, and I said, Professor, this development here that you are proposing, this development, the Usain Bolt complex, in my judgment, should be a complex which is not just to serve the narrow purposes of the university, but I want to urge you and invite you to be part of a thinking that allows us to open the doors to the public for some element of participation, some element of access. I do not expect that all and sundry will be able to walk through and have everything to do with the university, because ultimately that is not what the university is about. But you know, he understood very easily the point that is being made, because, Mr. Speaker, sir, we are talking about symbiotic benefit. The government, as I said, on one hand, invests over $100 million towards, sir, the financing of the operations of the university every year. But the university, in turn, must be part of the community. And that is true not only in Barbados, but it's true as a concept of how a university should and I think must function. It must be part of that society in which it is located. And I say this, sir, in all seriousness. Students come here, or students from here, will sojourn for a period of time at the university. But every single one of those students, sir, come with a lifestyle interest. Every single one of us who have been a student had a lifestyle interest. Some of those interests may have been in sports. Some of those interests may have been in music. Some of those interests may be cultural and creative activity, entertainment, sir. But every single one who has been able to, or who is able to fall within the university setting, whether local or whether foreign coming to live here for a period of time, has an interest. And to the extent that that interest can be meshed by the services, can be matched and married to the services that are created in a community where the university exists, then it is for the betterment financially, it is the betterment, the economic upliftment of that community. It is for the improvement, sir, of the opportunities for us to have a cultural diversity in that community. It is also, Mr. Speaker, sir, if we've got to take it out of the realm of theory and bring it straight into the pockets of people, sir, an opportunity, sir, for those people who have a little bar to get some money. It is an opportunity for those people who may be hairdressers to get a little money, engaged in cosmetology, nail technician, etc., to get a little money, Mr. Speaker, sir. It is a blessing for those who are involved in the transportation sector, the ground transportation sector, so that they too have an access to a window of opportunity financially that, but for the university in the community, they would not have, and certainly would not have in equal measure. And that is why I believe that is vitally important for us to do what we are doing by way of opening now another window for activity in the north of the island, which is associated with the educational effort, but at the same time will redound to the benefit of the people of the north by way of the economic opportunity that must flow logically from the effort. I also feel, Mr. Speaker, sir, that as we talk about symbiotic benefit, that, you know, it is understood that the university is really a public good. I use the example of the lands at the Lazaretto. I think that if we look at the elderly population that we have been able to see take a stroll across the Usain Bolt complex to get a little exercise on a morning in circumstances of safety, that's a good thing. I invite anybody to tell me that that is not desirable. But above and beyond the narrow parochial interest that I must have as an MP, I want to say to this country at this time, sir, that when the National Stadium could not function and has not been able to function, largely again because of short-sightedness and in some cases mismanagement of a previous administration, Mr. Speaker, sir, this administration cannot do everything on planet Earth in the space of 4 or 5 short years. We didn't even get to 5 years yet. In the space of 4 years, sir. But the reality, in total, we have not gotten there yet. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, the young people of Barbados were able to use and have access to a stadium as a result of the role that the university is playing in the context of providing symbiotic relationships in this country that our young people can benefit. We must build out this capacity, and we must make this type of investment and show this type of support to the University of the West Indies, Mr. Speaker, sir, because it has been there on our side in times of great national turmoil and difficulty. Lest we forget, during the course of the last 2 years, when COVID would have been the major headache in this country, many of the issues revolving healthcare would have been issues that we partnered in tackling with the same said University of the West Indies. I need not tell you, sir, because you, like I, have practiced law in this country, and you know the role that the University of the West Indies plays in the support of the legal profession and all that is related to its work. And, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is true of wider social policy. It is true of the agricultural sector. Mr. Speaker, sir, I say as Minister responsible for business development that a lot of good work is being done by the Cave Hill Campus School of Business, reaching into the community, partnering with the community, sir, on matters relating to financial literacy, on matters relating, Mr. Speaker, sir, to incubation and startup of business, the education of those people who want to be entrepreneurs, helping to, as I constantly say, this is my refrain, helping hold the hands of entrepreneurs so that they can navigate the pitfalls of that journey. And, Mr. Speaker, sir, that role that the university has played widely in Barbados is something that we have to be very thankful for, but equally very supportive of. This particular resolution demonstrates a commitment of a government to the ongoing nature of this process of collaboration, to the ongoing nature of partnership. That word has been used very often today. And as I say to you, Mr. Speaker, sir, I take the perspective that it is for us now, as we mature and develop that spirit of partnership, to be focusing on how we can take, the Prime Minister uses the term long-stay visitors. It is true of Ross University. But how do we take the what I call the lifestyle interests of every individual student, a campus that has in excess of 5,000 students? How do you take the lifestyle interests and the lifestyle requirements of each of those individuals, sir, and find a way that the community now, not just the country, but the community, the ordinary people that I represent, the ordinary people that the Honourable Member for St. Peter represents, the Honourable people, sir, who are represented by those of us on the west to north coast of this island, how do we monetize the opportunities, sir, which are presented by the lifestyle interests of these people? I feel, Mr. Speaker, sir, that, as I said, the presence of the university is an opportunity for us now to take that next step, where we build out in a true sense the concept of university townships, that in the parish of St. Peter, to the extent that the land used, vested, what was formerly the St. Joseph Hospital, vested in the University of the West Indies, is to give the university a degree of independence and allow it to leverage that land for its own development. Equally, sir, we must now also see it as an opportunity to leverage the financial opportunities of the people of the North. That the people of the North know, because they are at the foot of that university camp or that campus, that sphere of activity that was no longer there, but will come. That now, Mr. Speaker, sir, must be an opportunity for our people to have the benefit of, as I said, the range of services that can be provided. Whatever it is, because there's still a lack of specificity as to the full range of activities that will take place on that site. But whatever it is, Mr. Speaker, sir, whatever they are, our people must be plugged in. Equally, I feel that the next step at places like the Lazaretto and at Cave Hill, sir, is to now seriously take bring the logical conclusion to this journey of development by making sure, sir, that the benefits to be derived and that are being derived, housing, landlords in the constituency of St. James South have made a tidy living as a result of being so close to the University of the West Indies. It has been a boon to them. It has been a benefit to them in hard times, and it has been of assistance to them in good times. It has helped people who were of comparatively humble origins to take another step up the ladder. I know of people, sir, who have moved out of their houses in some parts of St. James and gone elsewhere so that the whole house can be dedicated to the service of providing housing accommodation for students. That is the kind of economic opportunity that I'm talking to, sir. I made reference of the ground transportation. The university there in the parish of the Honourable Member, in the constituency of the Honourable Member for St. Michael East, Ross University. Sir, what Ross University has done has been present an unprecedented opportunity for people in this country who are engaged in transportation. There is a co-op providing transport to those young people from Coverley, where they are living in large majority, if not all, to the university and back every single day. At one point, it was every 15 minutes. And therefore, sir, you had private entrepreneurs coming in, providing that experience. When the Honourable Member for St. George South was the minister responsible for small business and commerce in this country, that was unfolded. Not true? Yes. Yes. We are talking here, sir, about using the university and the investment, and this is where the politics comes in. Because, sir, what we had before was an administration that was prepared to turn away from the university, turn away from the investment that was being made historically from the very get-go. And the consequences of that was that you had a diminution, a reduction, a falling off in those people who would have been attending. Things became harder. Now we are saying, sir, the exact opposite, that you ride out the attrition, but, sir, you want to make sure that you broaden the base of participation, and that the more people you can have coming to Cave Hill campus, the wider you can make the base of activities of the campus, Mr. Speaker, sir, the more you can strengthen the spawn and the spread of the campus's wings, then, sir, the more people fall under that umbrella that allow for them, sir, to benefit, whether it is by way of rental income, provision of services, provision of food, provision of beverages of all types, transportation, cosmetology, everything, Mr. Speaker. So the whole gamut of opportunities financially to help lift up poor working class people in various parishes of Barbados who otherwise would not have that opportunity. That, at its core, is the developmental trajectory that this resolution sets us upon. And I, like the Honourable Member for St. George South, must say I make no apology for saying that. Because, sir, the contrast is clear. It is not an administration here who is going to associate itself with opportunity for personal well-being, personal financial benefit, dragging the administration's name as a whole and individuals within the administration into scurrilous relationships that cause the Public Accounts Committee to have to wake and do work that it otherwise should not have to do. That's not what this is about. This is about national development, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I feel very privileged to be part of this opportunity to have this discussion in the House today. As I say to you, Mr. Speaker, whether you look at it broadly from the perspective of the role that the university plays in terms of that, what I call a symbiotic relationship with the wider Barbados, the wider aims of the government. I identified a few sectors already where we have benefited tremendously from that work and continue to benefit from that partnership. Or whether, sir, you see it through the lens, as I suggest you should as an MP, of how the university can help your working class people stop from being so poor. and give them an opportunity that they would not otherwise have had. Or whether, Mr. Speaker, sir, we see it just as another opportunity for Barbadians to get into another field of endeavor and get a little bit more educational opportunity. However you play it out, sir, this resolution is vitally important because it wakes from the dead or the seeming dead a piece of land. How many hectares are we talking about? 8 hectares? 8 hectares. 21 acres of opportunity, Mr. Speaker said. 21 acres of opportunity. That, but for this administration, had been wrapped up in bush, no economic activity, no developmental opportunity, no access to the people of the North for betterment and improvement, wrapped up in, shrouded in scandal, packaged in mystery, Mr. Speaker, sir. Political disgrace. A hospital that saved lives. And this country has had to sit and stomach that for years and years. And so therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, yes, we've now at the stage where we've gotten behind that. But as I said, for me, this is now about lifting the gaze of the opportunity to the future. The honourable member is 100% right. If we don't go there, the rest of the Caribbean will do it for us. And we must understand that the world is out there. The world is out there and is interested in taking on business opportunities like this. So when in Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Speaker, sir, lands are allocated for university to have a hospital, can Barbados seriously remain with 26 acres there in bush? When, Mr. Speaker, sir, in Grenada, significant land resources are dedicated to the University of the West Indies for developmental opportunity, can Barbados keep 8 acres in the parish, the pristine parish of St. Peter, in bush? And Mr. Speaker, sir, when in Antigua and Barbuda, they are going to do the same thing. Barbados is to be content that for 20 long, miserable years, this golden opportunity, this nest egg, is to be kept in bush. And that's what it is about. And those people, sir, who come a-calling every 5 years, saying that in spite of region-wide approaches to putting the university on a self-sustaining financial model, in spite of that they, sir, are to be taken on because they have nothing to show, have done nothing, have made no public comment on any of these issues or any part of the way forward. We just go on to the general election. None of these things were discussed on Democrat-led party platform. None of it. None of it. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, this ought not to be a difficult thing. As I said, I want to commend the Honourable Minister of Housing, who's hit the ground running. I am very pleased, sir, by this particular resolution. I want to support the idea of a special purpose vehicle set up by the Solicitor General and the arrangements, sir, which are before the House, that Government of Barbados will hold 25% of the shares and the university will hold 75%. We are not, sir, looking at a charitable organization, but an operation designed to operate as a company, an entity which can drive a profit, leverage its assets, and in so doing, create more economic opportunity, financial opportunity, and business and commercial opportunity for the well-being of the people of this country. I am obliged, sir.
Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will be brief in my remarks on this resolution. I find that the purpose, the intent, the objectives of the resolution, the vesting of these lands in a special purpose vehicle of which the government of Barbados would have 25% ownership and the University of the West Indies 75%. I find the objectives noble. I find that there can hardly be any dispute that this is an honorable endeavor I must confess that the specifics of the endeavor, or even the broad framework of the endeavor, I do think we would have benefited from hearing a bit more about. That is not to suggest that I do not trust implicitly the goals and the community spiritedness and the drive for growth of the University of the West Indies. I absolutely do. And I think that our University of the West Indies in this country and in this region has been one of the institutions and continues to be one of the institutions that show the unique Caribbean quality and spirit of innovation and of integration with its community. And I see that the university is always striving to integrate more with the community to be able to bring solutions and bring ideas, and for that we are grateful. So I think this partnership is an important one. I think the potential in this activity is there. I hope to hear more and to see more about what is contemplated under the special purpose vehicle, especially since the government will retain a stake. And to the extent that you are a shareholder in a venture, you take on the assets along with the liabilities. And so I think we have to make sure that we bring some transparency to whatever that endeavor will be. The honourable member who led this resolution made reference to the issue of investment, the issue of leveraging the particular skills and knowledge of the entity that will be responsible for the management of this property. But I want to go beyond that, sir, to say that what is being contemplated here by vesting this property in a special purpose vehicle, by seeking to manage it as a key asset of the government of Barbados, needs to be done with every single asset of this country. Because what happens in cases like this, the people of Barbados are asked to agree to a resolution or to a vesting or to some activity that is being applied to some asset of theirs, because it is their asset as taxpayers. It is all of us as taxpayers. We are responsible for these assets. They're ours as they belong to the state. And so from time to time, we come to this honorable place and we ask, through you, sir, for agreement on matters such as this. We, the country, must believe and trust that whatever is contemplated for this particular property is the best possible use of that asset or of that resource. Sir, for some time we have talked about the issue of a sovereign wealth fund for the country. And for some time we have talked about, and the honourable member for St. George South made reference to having a register of the assets under his ministry, which I think is useful. But what the country needs to be able to do is to be able to see very clearly and to show very clearly to the citizens what are the country's assets. In our public financial management system, we tend to have, across the world, not just in Barbados, a cash-based system. The only things that we are concerned with are liquidity, revenue and expenditure. We are watching what we're spending and what we're making. We have no idea, I dare say, what our assets are. What are the real estate assets that we have? What is our stake in utilities and any utility companies, such as the Barbados Water Authority? What is that valued at? What are our transportation assets? the transportation systems, the transportation infrastructure, the fleets of vehicles, what are they worth? What are they worth not just in terms of the dollar value, but why is asset management important? What are they worth in terms of their potential to generate revenue for the country? What are they worth in terms of their potential to generate other kinds of value for the citizens of the country? I do not want to be cross about it, sir, but I do not think that in 2022 we should be coming to this place, pulling out of a bag a piece of property and asking the people of Barbados, let us vest this in a particular entity. Not that there's anything wrong with what we are asking that to be done here today, but we need to do the work of being able to picture and make visible all of our assets. And I'll tell you why. We have a lot of conversation about the issue of debt and the sustainability of that debt. And every time we take on a loan, and I would know well, sir, because in my last dispensation, I was leading that charge and had to shoulder a lot of the conversation and narrative around this issue of debt accumulation. And so everybody's concerned about debt accumulation. International financial institutions also look at your debt accumulation as a liability. But who is looking at the fact that as you're accumulating that debt, presumably you are also accumulating assets from that debt? I'll say what I mean. When we take on a loan to buy electric buses or to build a sewage treatment plant, that loan, that debt, that liability on one side is generating those assets on the other side. Nobody is asking the question when all the international financial institutions come here to cross-examine us about our levels of debt. Nobody's looking on the other side to see what is that debt giving us. What are those assets that we're accumulating? My point, sir, is that we need to move to the place where we go beyond having a vague idea about what the government owns and looking at how these assets, if they are properly managed, properly maintained, and put to good use, can create revenue in a planned and predictable way, can create income earning and investment opportunities in a planned and predictable way for the people of Barbados and our future generations. This is a question of intergenerational social justice, sir. Because we hear all the time, my children are going to have to pay back that debt. Yes, but if we do our job right, your children will have to pay back that debt. My children will have to pay back that debt. But they should also benefit from the assets, the goods, the public goods that that debt has created. It is a question of intergenerational, social, and economic justice. And I think that for too long, we have spoken about this issue of a sovereign wealth fund. And a sovereign wealth fund, just so I am sure that I am being understood and I'm making myself clear, usually looks at managing and reinvesting reserve assets, reserve liquidity. So when people talk about having a sovereign wealth fund, most of the time what they mean is that they're looking at taking government's foreign reserves, government's liquidity, and reinvesting it to earn money. And we should absolutely be doing that. We should not find ourselves on this 26th day of April 2022 without that entity. And I really, sincerely trust and hope that if it's not yet established, that it is coming to these good people of the Cabinet of Barbados very soon. I'm sure it'll find its way here for us to discuss, Mr. Speaker, sir. But apart from a sovereign wealth fund that tends to look mostly at liquidity, what we also need within that or attached to that is a public wealth fund. And we've seen in places like Singapore and other countries, and New Zealand and others, that being able to bring together all of your assets and have them managed just as we would manage any other kinds of equity or other investments. Have them managed, quite frankly, sir, by people who know what they are doing. We have found that this is a way to be able to make sure you're in a better position to recover from economic shocks. You have something, sir, backing your liabilities. You bring these assets on your balance sheet, and you say to the international community, this is the true picture of what Barbados owns. This is the true income earning potential of this country. You can take some of those assets and have the finances generated therefrom, fund a particular social good, fund a particular part of your education reform, fund a particular part of your social protection reform. We are under managing our assets. We have only a vague idea of what it is worth, and worse than that, not only do we not have a good idea of the revenue earning potential, so forecasting what you can earn and what citizens can benefit from, we also don't have the best idea of what the actual value is today. Because a lot of these valuations are based on these historical notions of what these things were used for. Well, it was used as a public good, so we're not going to assign any particular value to it. We are undervaluing ourselves, and we are missing so much potential and capacity to make the things that we own work for us. In many cases, when you have a true picture of the assets that you own, you may make a different borrowing decision. That picture of your assets will actually affect your interest rate, because when you go to the market with a stronger balance sheet, you get a better interest rate, you have better negotiating power in the market. But I want to say something else quickly before I take my seat, sir. And it is that this issue of creating a clear valuation, a clear inventory of what we have that is of value, doesn't just apply to real estate and transport board fleet or other physical assets. I'm involved in some work now, sir, that looks at valuing, and I know the former Minister of Maritime Affairs, the member for St. Michael South, was also very keen on this when he led that ministry. Valuing natural capital assets. What is the value of the coral reef? What is the value of the ocean? What is the value of the mangroves? These are real conversations that people are having today because they paint the picture of how we will be able to adapt to climate change. What is our negotiating power in that climate market that we can go to countries who are polluters and say, listen, this is the value of what we have that you are destroying, and you need to be held to account for that. Beyond that, I think it is also a matter of public trust. I think that one of the attributes of public wealth and asset funds is that they promote transparency. People know what we have. People know how we propose to use it to generate wealth and income and prosperity and value in their names and how they can be a part of that. But they also build, in so doing, the public trust, so that those responsible must come to the public to report on the maintenance of those assets and the performance of those assets. If we had such a system in place, sir, the member for St. James Central made reference in his intervention to the Public Accounts Committee. If we had that kind of system and principle and ideology and approach to asset management in place, sir, I dare say we would not have spent so many hours laboring over this case of this disappearing transport board bus from the last administration. Because we would have had a system where people responsible for the maintenance and the management of those fleets, of that fleet, were systematically called to account before any Auditor General's report came out, to tell us and show us what revenue and what value was being generated from those fleets in the name of the people of Barbados. But public trust, sir, also matters when it comes to the need to combat this culture of misinformation, deliberate misinformation that sometimes takes hold. And we saw it, regrettably, during the management of the COVID pandemic. It was, and I know the former Minister of Health, the former member for the city of Bridgetown, one of the most hurtful things to have occurred in the public narrative of this country. The notion that people sworn, and having lived all their lives, sworn to protect the health and to secure the survival of their fellow Barbadians. The notion that they would put their fellow Barbadians at risk in the COVID response was a very hurtful piece of misinformation. And I would say that was allowed to take hold, but I don't think it was allowed to take hold. I think that rightfully the people who started that misinformation became embarrassed, and that it did not perhaps spread as far as it might have. But I believe that such things can fester in a context or in a culture where people begin to lose public trust. And that's why I feel gratified and I congratulate the Honourable Prime Minister and this cabinet and the former cabinet for the spirit, not always coming with a perfect set of answers, but for the spirit of transparency that obtained during the last administration and that I believe will continue. That trust is important. I think that has to be applied to more things than COVID. I think it has to be applied through more media than press conferences. I think that having a clear register of public assets that go on balance sheet, to the extent that that is feasible, or that go into SPVs, to the extent that that may be desirable, I think that that is another way to garner that public trust. But I do think that such approaches to governance do contribute to the kind of trust that would have meant that those people who contributed to this notion that healthcare providers and healthcare administrators in this country would seek to do harm to people that were recovering from COVID, that those kinds of ideas would not take hold. And I will take this opportunity, sir, to again, I know that there are further congratulations planned and further honors planned and so on, but I think that sometimes it is just in words and saying to people, thank you, that you show your appreciation. I believe that, you know, there's a song I like by Jamil. I'm always quoting lyrics when I stand up in this place, so you'll forgive me. It's called Strongest Soldier. And he says, the strongest soldier gets the hardest fight. And when I think of the former Minister of Health, that's the song that comes to mind. Because he has proven himself in more ways than one, both literally and figuratively, to have been among one of the strongest soldiers among us that had a very difficult fight in responding to COVID. And so I take this opportunity again to publicly salute him and to publicly salute the team that was able to stand shoulder to shoulder with him and work with him through that. And some of them will be honored this week. But in particular, the former board of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, that I believe could never have imagined that they would have to not just deal with the business of the hospital, but also standing up all of the isolation and quarantine facilities at that time. I dare say they were called upon to do more than we would normally think or believe that a board would have to do. And at the same time, being able to begin the process of transformation of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital by standing up the 24-hour clinics, as well as a new accident and emergency department. And I hope I am not speaking out of turn, although I have been known to. When I say that, I do believe that because people have moved on, it does not mean that we should not make them a part of the acknowledgement or the way forward. And I do know there was not a formal opening of that expanded accident emergency department, which every day, in fact, had to be dynamic and nimble and switch up how they were treating COVID as they treated other emergencies coming to any department in an expanded environment. I know that it hasn't been officially opened. I don't know if there's any intent to officially open it, but I would not mind, as the Member of Parliament opposite that fine institution, attending a ceremony in which the Honourable former Minister was invited to come back and to formally open up that accident and emergency department alongside his current, the current minister, who is now benefiting from some of the tremendous work that his colleague did in that place. I think that these kinds of gestures, beyond standing on ceremony and standing on the official ways that these things tend to be done, these kinds of gestures go a long way to really put your money where your mouth is and show, not just say, but show that you appreciate a person's contribution. And this is not at all to take anything away from the current Minister of Health and the extent to which he has hit the ground running, and I understand is making quite the impression already in a very short space of time. But I do believe that legacy matters, and the legacy of that place is one that I think matters very much to Barbadians. So, sir, I have sought to use this opportunity to speak, not in academic terms, I hope, but to speak to something that I think is missing in our arsenal of public financial management. We need to be able to make visible the assets that we have. We need to be able to use them, govern them, manage them, to make money for regular Barbadians, to bring value to their lives. And the longer we sleep on that, is the longer we go without getting the full benefit of those things which our ancestors helped to create. And so I support this resolution insofar as I expect to see further information on exactly what the nature of this investment will look like and what it will bring to the people of Barbados. I have full confidence in the university to be able to agree with stakeholders, agree with the Ministry of Education and the government of Barbados on what that should look like, how it should be managed. But beyond that, I would like to see this approach brought to all of the assets in this country, that they are valued, that they are put on balance sheet where possible, that they are shown to the people, that they are shown to the international world. This is what Barbados has going for it. We are not simply a high-debt jurisdiction. We are causing those things that we own, those assets that we have, physical and otherwise, to work for us and to work for our people. And with those few words, sir, I commend this resolution.
Honourable Member for St. Philip West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this resolution, sir, because I know that it will contribute to the sustainability as well as to the financial independence of the University of the West Indies. And these matter at this time to us. I remember over the last few weeks sitting in the meetings where we as a region, a Caribbean region, we looked at what were the priorities for the University of the West Indies and how we were going to contribute in terms of funding. And what was important for us to understand is that whatever monies we as Caribbean governments and in this region were going to put towards the university and what other assets we were going to make available to the University of the West Indies, it really and truly had to be linked with where the university is going at this point in time. Many of us will know the university was formed back in what was called the Golden Age of universities. That was back from between 1945 to 1967 or thereabout, where you had a rapid expansion of universities and you had the increased investment in research. And the University of the West Indies is one such of those Golden Age universities. We have started as a regional institution, but because of the contribution of Barbados and other governments in this region, we have been able to move this regional institution into a globally recognized university. If we look at some of the rankings, and there are many rankings, but they're top three. Among those top three are the Times Higher Education. And in that ranking, you will notice that the University of the West Indies, it is ranked 4 in the top 4% of the world. You will also notice that it is ranked in the top 2% in Latin America and the Caribbean. And of course, among those Golden Age universities, among the top 1% of those universities fall in that period. And I share that because it is important for us to understand that what started out as a little board shop back in Jamaica, where back when we started the University of the West Indies, it has now grown globally. And it is because of the investments of assets, whether it be financial or the kind of land that is currently subject of this resolution, that we have been able to grow it. At the time when we started the University of the West Indies, the dream was that of light, liberty, and learning, that was what it was set up to do. And we need to understand that if we are to make sure that it is sustainable and that it becomes financially independent, that we have to make sure that it is done with the light and the liberty and the learning at the forefront. And I believe that the lands that will be vested in Cave Hill of the University of the West Indies, and I differentiate because there is vesting in the University of the West Indies, which is the entire region, and it goes into the center, the university center, and then there is the vesting in Cave Hill, which is also an entity within Barbados that is part of the University of the West Indies. And this vesting is meant to be for Cave Hill as part of the University of the West Indies family. And sir, the point that I started out making is that we have to ensure that whatever investments we make in the University of the West Indies will continue to take us to where we're going next. And the University of the West Indies has made it very clear that where it wants to go is towards what it is calling a revenue revolution, where it is moving from its dependence on government for the most part for financing, and it wants to take the institution over the next several years to a place where it can become more revenue generating and more self-sufficient and financially independent. The vesting of this land contributes to that greater strategic vision for the University of the West Indies. You would have heard the member from St. George South say that part of that contribution to helping it to remain sustainable is that, you know what, right now, the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill campus in particular, right here in Barbados, it sits on a number of properties that belong to the government, including this one here. Now, once they're sitting on government land, not that government would ever do it, but government can always say, well, get off our land. Not that this Barbados Labour Party government will ever do so, because we are committed to education in a significant way, and that commitment continues. But in the, pardon me? But in the vesting of this land in Cave Hill, it ensures that this land becomes part of their asset base. And you would have heard other members in here explain how having that as an asset that belongs to them can certainly boost their ability to raise that revenue that they are seeking, that they're on a path to doing, as it relates to moving the university into a more sustainable place. In addition to being able to be more financially sustainable, a key strategic effort that is being made by the University of the West Indies is to monetize its ideas. Monetizing its ideas means making money from the things that the university produces, from the knowledge that it produces, from the products that it produces, from the research that it does, so that research doesn't just sit and become dusted paper on shelves, but it really and truly becomes the kind of work that can be put to use for the people of the region, and also to be applied to global issues and to solve global problems. The effort is that we look for the major areas of growth and expansion for the university, and the university is well advanced in its effort to identify what these specific areas are, and then to be able to exploit these areas to be able to generate more revenue for the university that will then enable it to do more for the people of the region, as well as to better position itself in the globe. And so the monetizing of ideas is another second part of that strategic vision that this vesting of land will help to expand, to support at this time. Thirdly, it's the internationalization of the university. It has a big, long word. Basically, it is making the university more international. And with that, it is about the exports, the education exports. It is about the foreign students that, just as Barbadian students will go to school in England and Canada and China and the US and other places, that we are able also to attract international students to Barbados. And part of that internationalization gives us access to the cultures of the world. It helps to broaden our world's view. It helps to expand our thinking. It helps us to be able to advance the whole effort we're making towards second language. There are many benefits of us seeking to internationalize the University of the West Indies that will redound to the benefit of the Caribbean region and, in truth, improve our footprint globally. And so the support that I am giving to this resolution, it speaks to the sustainability, the financial independence, the monetizing of the ideas of the university, and the internationalization of the university. These are all strategic goals within the University of the West Indies that will be justly served by this. And I will be short because I believe that many of my other colleagues have explored a number of the other areas that make this resolution so significant and so worthy of support at this time. But I cannot close without saying that this Barbados Labour Party government and this administration, this and the next, has continued to demonstrate that by providing opportunity to more persons, to more of our young people, to more of our older persons as well, to be able to get an education, we are indeed on the rise again in terms of meeting our objective of ensuring that we have at least one university graduate in each household that is contributing and living a viable life and financing their families in a meaningful way. You would have heard the member from St. James Central, I believe it is earlier, speak about the fact that we had returned the financing of tuition to students of the University of the West Indies. And many people say, well, that's a big deal. You talk about that all the time. But let me share with you a little bit of the numbers that can let you see the impact that the policy of this Barbados Labour Party administration to pay tuition fees, that kind of impact just in the short period of time. In the year 2013-2014, remember the refusal to pay tuition by the former Democratic Labour Party would have started back, I believe, in 2014. In that 2013 to 2014 year, sir, the University of the West Indies, certainly here, we had 8,634 students. here in Barbados. By 2017, 2018, that had dropped to 5,161, more than 3,000. Since this Barbados Labour Party government returned tuition, the payment of tuition to the University of the West Indies for our students, we now in 2021, 2022, have moved that number back up to 6,735. And it is anticipated that if we continue on our current level of intake, 2022, 2023 will indeed be a much bigger year. This is what this University of the West Indies is, why it is so deserving of the support of the people of Barbados, why it is so deserving of the investment of land that is a part of this resolution. Because we are expanding, we are opening that gateway, we are opening opportunity for more people to be able to use education to empower them. It is an opportunity for us then to deliberately partner as a government, where we say we are not just giving money, but we are prepared to partner in a special purpose vehicle at a 25%, 75%, saying that we are vested in education. It is not just something we contribute to financially, but it is something in which we intend to stay vested and invested on behalf of the people of Barbados. And it is with these few words, Mr. Speaker, that I lend my full support to this resolution for the vesting of lands in St. Joseph.
Honourable Member for St. Philip North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too rise to lend my support to the resolution, but of course, as is only natural, I need to put in a plug for the Ministry of Health and Wellness. It is a pleasure as well to see that finally, after many years, in addition to the other buildings that were mentioned by the Honourable Member for St. George South, that this derelict building / site will be now put to good use by the University of the West Indies. Whether it be, I don't know their reasons for it, I don't know what their plans are, but I do remember that we still maintain 25% of the share. With that, I am asking that the building be considered, this is just my wish and this is just my hope, be considered to play a part within the Ministry of Health, ergo the health of the nation of Barbados, whether it be by health tourism, which is fine, but I want the UE to remember that the most affected in a negative way by the NCDs and the unavailability of health services and the lack of medical insurance, all of these lie with the poor black individual, the poor black Barbadian, that occupies the majority of the healthcare sector in terms of public healthcare sector. So this initiative, I am sure they'll put it to good use, will not only provide employment, as the member for St. Peter has suggested and wished for as well, but I am hoping that it be considered as part of the plan to make UE, although we do medicine now, along with Guyana and Trinidad, in terms of a medical faculty. I would like to see it built out such that efforts are put into the teaching of the individuals at the hospital, whether it be the nurses and the hospital and the other healthcare institutions. We are badly in need of specialized medical services, specialized nursing in almost every area, specialization of the doctors, and by this I mean the funding or providing the courses wherever necessary. The hospital now is inundated, as we all know, and I have to speak on it because of where we stand now especially, inundated with NCDs. The bed capacity is almost abysmal. I would like to see UE in this effort do something to aid this with respect to health, whether it be by putting funding into the hospital, whether it be by lending extra beds to the hospital, whether it be by supporting initiatives that we already have. I know the Chronic Disease Research Center is part of UE, and it has been, I don't want to use the word dormant, but information coming out of it, largely because of COVID, was a bit lacking. I want to see efforts like this increased. I want to see internship posts expanded. For several years, I believe, maybe after my time, for several years, the placement of interns within the island of Barbados has been always under strain. We were having to apply to other jurisdictions, Bahamas, Trinidad, Jamaica, for placement with respect to internship. The number of medical students we are seeing, and I assume it's in almost every area outside of medicine, but we are seeing, to some extent, a lack of experience. One reason being the numbers of medical students and interns are large. So where we would like to put the education properly, because of the numbers, it is hard. Let me put it a different way. When I was there, we had maybe 2 medical students per bed on rounds. Now you can get excess of 7, 8. So obviously learning in those areas will be affected. I would like to see UE bringing out courses or lending to the funding of courses for laboratory technicians. This is an area that is badly needed. Laboratory technicians, engineering technicians, all of these areas need help. I remember my first hip replacement I witnessed in the theaters of the St. Joseph Hospital at the time. Obviously, it would have been fascinating at that point in time, as it still is now, but we have lost that extra spacing where we could do these large time-consuming operations in another place, whether it be for private or public persons, individuals in the community. These are the things I would like to see, whether it be building out a hospital there. If not, whatever is put there, some of it be put into the realm of healthcare in Barbados, if not only for tradition. Right now, and funny enough, NCDs, as I said before, are forefront outside of COVID, and I'm hoping to take over from COVID once COVID behaves with respect to the NCD fight. But we had, if I may, Mr. Speaker, Sir Hilary Beckles joined me in a presentation not so long ago, and he has supported the efforts with respect to the NCDs, of course, in his realm, dating it back to the times of slavery. These are things, and I know, obviously, if he has it, it's in the forefront of the University of the West Indies, whether it be for healthcare, whether it be for reparations, whether it be for both. So the support is there. So with these few words, I can only hope and encourage the University of West Indies and the 25% stakeholding we still have, that some of it be placed under the umbrella of the healthcare system, specifically the hospital, which really needs help, a lot of help. So if those few words, Mr. Speaker, I end here. Thank you so much for indulging me.
Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to speak on this resolution and to indicate that this is but the first, because it is only on the resumption of coming back into government and formally into office that I learned that not even the lands at Cave Hill are vested in the University of the West Indies, and that hitherto a commitment by a previous Barbados Labour Party government to vest the lands at Lazaretto in the University of the West Indies Cave Hill campus was also vetoed
by the last government. Now, let me make my position very clear, sir. This country has benefited significantly from the presence of the Cave Hill campus of the University of the West Indies. This region has benefited from the presence and existence of the University of the West Indies. Only last night, at the Tom Adams lecture, the distinguished lecturer, Dr. Henderson Carter, who is the head of the Department of History, would have been referring to the 60th anniversary celebrations that are now being prepared for them on that campus, the Diamond Jubilee. When we came to office, sir, we inherited a situation where the University of the West Indies finances were compromised significantly by a reduction in the commitment both on economic costs, but also by the introduction of student fees for persons attending Cave Hill campus. And why? Because once those fees were introduced, the enrollment at Cave Hill dropped by about 40%. And we made a commitment from the campaign trail, which we honored in spite of going into an IMF homegrown program, to reinstate the payment of fees for Barbadians at the Barbadian educational institutions, at the Community College and the Samuel Jackman Prescott Institute, but also at the University of the West Indies, whether the Cave Hill campus, the Mona campus, the St. Augustine campus, the Open campus, and now you have the Five Islands campus. And Mr. Speaker, at no stage over the course of the last 4 years almost have we had cause to regret making that decision. Not once. Because we all know that it is the only route by which persons can escape poverty legitimately in this country. Or one of the only routes, I should say, because there's the vocational route as well. But even that requires knowledge. And it is the acquisition of knowledge and training that then allows us to be able to have the productive citizens who can earn for us as a nation. When we came to office, the Barbados government owed the university almost, I think, $140 million. And we therefore had to settle an arrangement with them. And part of that arrangement included us putting on the table assets, and in particular, the vesting of the Cave Hill campus, the vesting of the Lazaretto, we discovered wouldn't have to be done as well, and in particular, the vesting of the old St. Joseph Hospital lands that would be vested in a special purpose company, and the government of Barbados would retain 25% in that company, and the University of the West Indies would have 75% vested in them. Very recently, I have been in discussion with them to see how we can work collectively to be able to encourage a medical tourism investment that will allow the university to be able to ensure that its students going into the medical faculty are in a position to be assured of access to internships. And this is a major problem. This was a problem when I was Minister of Education in 1994. We have had some years when we were able to resolve it seamlessly, and other years where it became a huge bugbear. But I feel that morally, if a person is going to go and study medicine, they ought to be assured of the ability to complete their training such that they can practice medicine rather than being left in a lurch with respect to where they will do their internships. Now, Mr. Speaker, therefore, it is a matter then for us regionally, not just domestically, to see how we can expand the number of internship places available based not purely on the provision of medical services to our domestic population, but including the provision of medical services to a global population, but in our countries in the region. And why do I feel as strongly as I do on this? This country, Mr. Speaker, has had a reputation for medical tourism before it knew what medical tourism was. And you only need to look at why George Washington left the United States of America to come to Barbados. He came to Barbados for his brother to be able to recuperate from the respiratory problems that he was having. This is a country that constructed a psychiatric hospital in the 19th century. And that's why I'm so impatient, and I speak to the Minister of Health, and he knows how I feel, and the Ministry of Health, for us to have a mental wellness program rolled out, especially coming out of the COVID pandemic, where we know that the restrictions and the lockdowns have played on people's heads, have disrupted people's stability mentally. And I feel that in this country that has distinguished itself in the provision of public health services and the settlement of public health policy, we have been the ones who have exported the great public health advisors of the 20th century in the Caribbean. So George Allen, who became Director General of the Pan American Health Organization. Sir Kenneth Standard in the University of the West Indies. Sir Kenneth Stewart. Barbados has a distinguished record, and we had to. When you live on 166 square miles, the one thing that must matter is public health, because we live cheek by jowl. But in addition to public health, the provision of medical tourism can range the entire gamut of services, and in my view, we have now to be serious about going about it. We built a hospital at Harrison's Point in 4 weeks. In 4 weeks. And it tells us what we can do if we put our mind to it. Now, I want to speak to that because in 1995, the current Minister for Education was the director of the Youth Entrepreneur Scheme and used to attend a weekly management meeting, so she will recall. We moved the Barbados Youth Service to Harrison's Point. It lasted there for a few years, and after I left, whatever reasons were taken, they were moved from there. No problem, except the buildings became derelict. And all the money the government of Barbados had invested went into Maxwell Pond. The youngsters may not know what Maxwell Pond is. Went into the earth. As Attorney General and Minister of Home Affairs, in 2005, when the prison burnt, I remember going to St. Lucie with Major Banks and others, and the then commissioner. And we went to the old plant of Atlantic Manufacturing, which was obliquely opposite St. Lucie Parish Church. I'll never forget it, because when we were there is when we learned about the death of one of the persons in the prison, because that was the day after the fire had happened. We settled, and we agreed that it was perfect for conversion, and that we would have to add on to it as we went along. By 9 o'clock the night when I walked into my house, Major Binks called me and said, "Attorney General, I'm sorry to report to you that that building will not withstand a Category 1 hurricane." I said, "Major Binks, we didn't tell him at all. If it's not going to withstand a Category 1 hurricane, we are now in the month, I think it was the end of April. How am I going to tell Parliament and the taxpayers that we're going to fix up a building that may not withstand a Category 1 hurricane and may not be standing by the end of the hurricane season. I said, please inform the Commissioner of Police and the Chief of Staff. It is now 9:25. Meet me at Harrison's Point at 11 o'clock that same night. And the poor officers had just gotten home, everybody bathed and come back down the road. We went to St. Lucie and went in to the building that has the submarine facility, the one right on the coast. The building, I swear, had not been opened up for years. And when the rats started to move, I will not say which men started to move too. Suffice it to say that it was clear that that would require too much work. When we were going back up the hill, however, we came across these other buildings and we stopped the cars. We had no measuring tape, and I said to the then Commissioner and Chief of Staff, I said, look, both of you look as though you got feet that we can, once we pace this out, we can get a rough thing. And we sat there in the cars and did the back of envelope numbers. There was a huge generator, bigger than the clerk's table, and about as tall as 4 foot high, that had not been moved for decades. And we indicated that by the next evening we needed to move that and to see what could happen. Within 8 days of being there, we moved prisoners from Glenderry. It wasn't Glenderry, sorry, it was the building in St. Philip, the BIDC building in St. Philip, and brought them down there with the exception of the prisoners who were on death row, who went to District E police station at Speightstown. You will recall, sir. I say this to make the point that Barbados housed a prison on that site for just under 18 months. I was the most shocked person when I went with the Attorney General at the end of February. The member for St. Peter, the Honourable member for St. Peter would know it was the evening that we were opening and renaming your predecessor's highway, K&R Husbands, the Honourable K&R Husbands, Doc Husbands as he was affectionately known. And I said to the AG, before it gets dark, let us go to Harrison's Point, because in my mind, I believe that this can be the location for us to put a dedicated facility so that we do not bring COVID into the hospital easily or at all, and that we need to have a separate place in order to do that. When we got there, 15-foot high bush, every wire removed, every conduit removed, every window and door removed. Now, why am I giving you this discussion in the middle of this resolution? Because, Mr. Speaker, this government and any future government must not allow that facility, which has now been used 3 times in the last 30 years, to fall into a state of dilapidation again. And therefore, what must be done, in my view, is a strategic partnership either with other local and international private sector players to maintain Harrison's Point as a site for medical tourism as we go forward, even as we get out of the management of the COVID-19 pandemic. This government initially spent, how much was it, Marcia? I can't remember. It was what? The EIB loan. It was, yeah, but we haven't done. The EIB has lent us money up to a maximum of 60 million. And the current minister is now working to be able to have other aspects, because we've said we're not paying for any consumables out of that loan. That loan is to build capacity. And we were able to access it at 2%, and with a 5-year moratorium, I believe, but a 20-year loan. Excellent terms, and we thank the European Investment Bank for that. But the actual spend was, I think, initially 15 million, and we've had to spend money converting the tertiary building into primary and secondary last year in the middle of the Delta outbreak. Mr. Speaker, it therefore is necessary, and I've given the Minister of Health a remit that he must find investment along with Invest Barbados for Harrison's Point. We are only using a fraction of the land at Harrison's Point. Harrison's Point is 80 acres. And the last government had entered into an arrangement, which is a story and a tale for another day, on Harrison's Point to do a tourism investment that never came to reality. So that there's no doubt about the suitability of that site for tourism, but there's equally no doubt about the suitability of it for recovery and medical recovery, because the air is fresh, the view is therapeutic, and quite frankly, it is nestled on that part of the island where it is not the subject of bustling traffic and activity. And I believe, therefore, that a combination of a site there and a site at the St. Joseph Hospital will bring the provision of healthcare services to the north, but not just simply for the north or for Barbados. Barbados must not limit itself to its population with respect to the provision of medical services. We can be a global provider of medical services from this rock. We've done it in the past without knowing that we were doing it, and we can do it in the future by carefully planning and structuring it out. And I'm open to all players and all partners. And if there is, for example, a determination that the University of the West Indies through this SPV may want to partner with those who ultimately go in at Harrison's Point too, so that you have a facility that is capable of servicing an international market and providing medical services at a fraction of the cost that you would otherwise access them in the developed world, then this is our business and we must go for it. And Mr. Speaker, this step this morning is a statement of confidence and courage in our ability as a nation to carry our country to become a premier destination for the supply of medical services globally. We have too many people who have studied medicine. We perhaps need more people who have studied business. But we have too many people who have studied medicine. And we need to have an entrepreneurial spirit, Mr. Speaker, in order to be able to convert these into assets that will earn exponentially for this country and provide jobs for the people, particularly of Barbados. And Mr. Speaker, I say the member for St. Michael North, the honourable member for St. Michael North, under the BIDC, they went out on a tender, and I hope that it will be issued soon, if it hasn't been, for the award of a consultancy service to help reposition this country to go into the life sciences industries. We cannot have 6,000 people studying science at Cave Hill campus, and the only opportunity available to them is teaching. Teaching is a noble profession, and at some point in my life I think I can end up teaching too. But my point is that it cannot be the only option, and we need to be able to be developing labs, developing industrial projects where we can utilize. Up to last night, the gentleman, Dr. Carter, spoke about his daughter who is a microbiologist. And a lot of them are having hell finding work in this country. So we have a solemn obligation as a government to attract enterprises and industry and research labs here that will allow the investment that we have made in their education to pay off without them having to go to another man's country to earn a living. They must be able to earn a living in the land of their birth and not have to go and emigrate for that to happen. So, Mr. Speaker, I am happy that this has finally made its way here. I thank the Minister of Housing for bringing it. It has been, regrettably, in my view, on the road too long, but he has brought it, and I thank him for that. Secondly, I want to say that as this government identifies the possibilities for the future, I have one major passion project that I have broken down into 4 divisions, and I think you all have heard me speak about it sufficiently. One is the establishment of, one of the 4 parts is the establishment of the memorial at Newton Plantation. with a memorial to the 570 plus slaves that were buried there, and that we are using the opportunity to take the fact that we have the second largest transatlantic slave records, I'm told, for this part of the world and the Western world, and build a genealogical research center there that will allow people to come from all over the world and to know more about their lineage. Many people would never have known. For example, you watch movies and you see Gwyneth Paltrow. But I would never have known that Gwyneth Paltrow's lineage comes out of Barbados if Henry Louis Gates did not do his special program that he does on people's ancestry on PBS, Public Broadcasting Service. But we also need a museum ensuring that slavery or forced migration does not become a part of the language of this hemisphere or this world again. And Barbados is the place where racism in its modern form was forged in the 17th century. This is the parliament, I've said it too often in the last week with the congressional visits. Regrettably, this is the parliament that passed the 1661 Slave Code, and we have to continue to pay penance for it, because that was the code that informed other slave codes directly and indirectly in the Americas. Secondly, the establishment of a spiritual university at Codrington College. Why? Because this world needs to know how people of different religions and faiths can live together. And I'm not only talking about the Abrahamic faiths. And there's some who attack me, but regrettably, we are not all of the same faith. The truth is that we are not all of the same gender, we're not all of the same race, we are not all of the same anything. And we have to learn to live with each other on this planet called Earth. And I've already met with the Archbishop of the West Indies, and the principal at Codrington College is taking a very, very keen interest in making this happen. As you know, he would have led also to the representatives of the Abrahamic faiths walking in town together collectively 2 years ago in a spirit of partnership and cooperation. We feel that Barbados can set that example for the rest of the world, but at the same time, it becomes a niche form of tourism by bringing people here to reflect. Codrington College is one of the oldest theological seminaries, if not the oldest in the Americas. And we are the home to the oldest synagogue in the Americas, right here in Bridgetown. The third project, Mr. Speaker, and these are not necessarily to be funded by the consolidated fund, because we're going to raise fundraising efforts internationally to be able to help Barbados be the beneficiary of these types of projects, which will all lead to greater numbers of visitors and a greater product for persons to engage in once they land here. The third one, Mr. Speaker, and ironically, once again, we have representatives from Bollywood with us this whole week, looking to sign a memorandum of understanding so that Barbados can be a site for on-location film shooting, while at the same time, the development of an indigenous film industry. And we have said in our manifesto that we must repurpose old buildings for new things. And therefore, the old sugar factories and the old sugar plantations ought to be repurposed into the sound stages where necessary for us to be able to ensure that we can allow people to tell their stories, but we will build the skills to tell our stories as well through the development of an indigenous film industry. We have just finished hosting a team of people from Outer Banks, I think is a Netflix series. This is the second series that they've done here, and we want to be able to bring more people to this country with respect to that. And the fourth limb of those passion projects is the University of the West Indies' role in helping to settle policy for small island developing states. I would glibly call it a school of public policy. So Hillary and others are now crafting it in the context of a school for international justice for small island developing states and others. And why? Because whether it is climate justice, economic justice, social justice, the bottom line is that small island developing states in this current world order are left in the same place that they were before the establishment of the United Nations, and when the imperial order still existed. And that while there has been the appearance of, well, there's more than the appearance, there has been progress. But regrettably, the progress has not necessarily closed the gap sufficiently between those who are accustomed to power and those who are seeking room, fiscal and policy space to be able to exercise dominion over their own affairs such that they can improve the quality of lives of their citizens. We feel that the University of the West Indies has a credible and legitimate role to play in this respect, and to that extent, therefore, the governments of the region and the government of Barbados in particular must work hand in hand with UWI Cave Hill campus to ensure that we can be that place where people from across the world can come and reflect, learn, study, teach on matters pertaining to social justice, economic justice, climate justice, with respect in particular to small island developing states. I know that Sir Hilary is hoping to carry before the Council the concept of a global campus, and that will be a combination of the rebranding of the open campus, but the establishment of these new, this new school, which must also be a revenue earner for the University of the West Indies so that it can continue to minimize the extent to which it must rely on governments in the Caribbean to carry the majority of the load in their functioning and existence. Mr. Speaker, I've shared these things with you because I feel, I am so happy to be back in this building. I am so happy to be back in Bridgetown that you're going to hear me more and more even now, because I believe that there are some things that we need to start talking about as a nation if we are going to make the journey to being world class by 2030. I know in my bones that we can do it, but it is not going to be easy, and it is going to mean having some difficult discussions, just as you do in your family. It's not everything in a family that's be hunky-dory every day. You have to have some difficult discussions sometimes. And in having those difficult discussions, we can move forward. And especially when we're breaking new ground, where everything new invariably has growing pains, so that there will be some discomfort. But we have the capacity and the resilience to get past that. This morning, this resolution represents the statement of faith that we have in a future that says that Barbados can be a provider of global medical and educational services, that we have had distinctions in the past, but we now want it consistently to be part of our future. And that tourism as tourism on its own cannot function that easily, as we learned with COVID. But when we have tourism that is anchored to medical facilities, or tourism that is anchored to educational facilities, or that tourism that is anchored to sporting capacity or cultural, making movies, then all of a sudden you remove the discretionary aspect of why a person would just want to come and visit and be part of here. And Mr. Speaker, you've heard me say over and over, we do not have enough people coming to work every day, and we learned the hard way that we don't even have enough people living here to take the output of our farmers with respect to what they produce. So that if we want to be serious, then these are the steps that we must be taking to guarantee a stable and prosperous future for our people. I thank the House for considering this resolution. I ask the Honourable Minister of Housing to bring the other resolutions that will appropriately, before the 60th anniversary of the University of the West Indies Cave Hill campus, that will make them right and that will allow their balance sheet to reflect an asset that is known as the acreage at Cave Hill and the acreage at Lazaretto. And that if we do that, we will give them a leg up, as we've already committed to doing with being able to ensure that 5% of our renewable energy is shared between the University of the West Indies and the CARICOM regional institutions. Why, Mr. Speaker? Because it reduces the pressure on us as a central government with what we must give them. But secondly, we are the beneficiaries of their output in every respect. So this is just allowing us to make them stronger while stabilizing our own circumstances. Mr. Speaker, I strongly support this resolution, and I'm obliged to the Minister for doing us the courtesy of bringing it before this honourable chamber. Thank you.
Honourable Member for St. George South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, let me thank the Prime Minister. I don't want to use the phrase putting the icing on the cake, because this resolution started with the Prime Minister's vision with respect to building out the tertiary institution at the University of the West Indies. And as she said in her wrap-up, to give Barbados the opportunity to be seen as one of the world's leading global medical training institutions, that is UWI, utilizing the assets that we debated this morning, and the further call to bring to this House the other lands at the Lazaretta and those lands at the Cave Hill campus that the University of the West Indies so meaningfully occupy. And I will give this lower house my word and commitment that the resolution requested by the Prime Minister will be here before the House within the next 4 to 6 weeks. But I also want to go further and thank my colleagues who contributed to this debate, and also who brought a different perspective and varying views. Member for St. Philip West, the education, who showed that under the last administration, the enrollment at university dropped by some 40%. And she also gave us the insight into the plans for the University of the West Indies in the partnership with the Ministry of Education. The member for St. James Central, I want to thank him, who looked together with the key asset of government and the specific and the broad framework to be determined, and the whole need to build out entrepreneurship and the drive for young people to utilize the skills and the institutions, not just to have degrees, but to create wealth among working class people. The member for St. Michael's South Central, Sovereign Wealth Fund and the Public Wealth Fund, the utilization and the management of our assets, and also the utilization of the derelict properties, and to have that register before Parliament and to see how best we can monetize that register. I want to thank her as well. The member for St. Peter, who brought the holistic view, the view not only the value that the university has brought to this country, but the decentralization of the university and the asset to benefit people within rural and urban Barbados, and I want to thank him. Mr. Speaker, you know, this debate, while it was a vesting of lands, it spoke to several developmental trusts within that institution, the University of the West Indies, and it spoke to, Mr. Speaker, and members of this lower chamber, with the whole need to allow the University of the West Indies to become more independent and self-sufficient, and creating a balance sheet that they can utilize the asset to monetize and to take the strain off for government resources. There's much more, Mr. Speaker, I can add. The Prime Minister, who started this project and also put the icing on the cake this afternoon. And with those few words, Mr. Speaker, I beg that the resolution to vest 8.698 hectares, 21.485 acres, of land.
Honourable Member, you should move the rescission to rescind
I can call it rescission.
before you move the vesting.
Order number 6, sir. In the name of the Honourable Minister of Housing, to move the passing of a resolution to rescind a resolution passed by the Honourable House of Assembly on the 16th day of March 2012 and the Honourable Senate on the 28th day of March 2012, and published in the Official Gazette as Resolution Number 12 of 2012 on the 5th day of April 2012, approving the lease to American World Clinics Barbados Limited of a parcel of land together with the buildings thereon situate at Ashton Hall in the parish of St. Peter in this island for the development and operation of an international health center.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that the resolution, as cited, the number 12, 2012, that was passed on April 3rd, 2012, to lease the St. George's Hospital property to the American World Clinics Barbados Limited, that resolution to be rescinded.
The question is that the aforementioned resolution be rescinded. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Order number 5, sir. In the name of the Honourable Minister of Housing, to move the passing of a resolution to approve, in accordance with Section 5 of the Crown Lands Vesting and Disposal Act, Chapter 225, the vesting in a commercial special vehicle in which the government of Barbados will hold 25% of the shares and the University of the West Indies at Cape Phil will hold the remaining 75% of the parcel of land, the property of the state, formerly known as St. Joseph Hospital, situate at Ashton Hall in the parish of St. Peter in this island, for the purpose of a joint venture between the government and the University of the West Indies.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that this resolution, with Section 5, in accordance with Section 5 of the Crown Lands Vesting and Disposal Act, Cap 255, to approve the vesting in a commercial special purpose vehicle in which the government of Barbados will hold 25% of the shares and the University of the West Indies holds 75% on a plot of land, 21.485 acres, now pass.
Questions that the aforementioned resolution do not pass. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This resolution stands passed. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the House be adjourned until the 17th of May at 10 a.m.
The question is that this House be adjourned until Tuesday, the 17th day of May at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. Before we adjourn, I wish to acknowledge the presence of Ms. Alicia Todd, the Director General of Par-Americas, which is headquarters in Canada. This organization and institution provides tremendous assistance to the Parliament in the Caribbean, and she is here to attend a meeting with UN Women, the Commonwealth Secretary, and Civil. I hope you have an enjoyable stay, Ms. Todd, and that you enjoy the warmth of Barbados, and then you will go back and bring numerous visitors from Canada to this country. I hope you have an enjoyable stay in Barbados. This honourable chamber stands adjourned.